On a variety, I gotta talk about this because I love it. You know, every variety has a different pattern, and so I'll look, and I noticed some of these, the varieties will have 2 chambers. This one has 4 typically. Now and then there's 6, and I'm pointing that out because I think this tomato usually has 4, and so I might just, as I'm selecting ripe tomatoes, keep that in mind as I squeeze them out. You know, there's this beautiful gelatiny material. And if you're harvesting, one great way, by the way, of harvesting, you want this gelatiny material is, if you have a lot of tomatoes and you're making sauce and everything, you can just, you know, save a bunch of this goop while you're doing it. Throw the rest in the pot and make the sauce. You don't have to throw away any of the fruit here for this. But the classic thing to do is, they say, come and you squeeze out the goop. So this particular variety, called Jaune Flamme, it's a new one for me. This is an heirloom one I got from Seed Savers Exchange. And I like it because, I gotta show you the anatomy again. It has a really thick flesh. And I found that this year the tomatoes are kind of moist, and you know, the flavors weren't very strong. This one dried great, made great sauces. Yeah, I'm just really impressed with this variety. So this is a mature one. Be sure to pick a mature tomato. You don't want any green on it. In fact, if it falls off in your hand, it's great. If it's split, that's even better, because what we're doing is, in the observation of nature, what a tomato does is it falls to the ground and it ferments. So we're mimicking this falling to the ground thing, and that, oh, it was all cracked and icky, and you know, you didn't want it anymore.
I have a question. You know,
Go
a lot
ahead.
of us have had blight with our tomatoes this year. And are those tomatoes okay to save, or are they going to pass on some of that
Well,
fungus?
there's discussion about blight resistant, and I'll tell you about one of the vendors at the farmers market had a lot of tomatoes, and he was talking about that he has all these heirloom varieties and everything, and he says, well, and then there's this one here. This was a renegade, you know, one of these ones that come up in your garden, the wild ones, volunteers, some people call them. And he said, you know what I noticed this year? He said, they aren't dying off. Everybody else is. And now here's a seed saver thinking. You know, you're observing nature. You're observing the characteristics of your plants and saying, I wonder. That's the first thing. I wonder. You open your mind. And then you say, what can we do here? What can I do? How can I participate with nature here? And his remark was, I would call this a hypothesis, is that those seeds wintered over in blight soil, because it's in the soil and it gets spattered up on the leaves, and then it starts creeping up the plant. He is wondering whether they wintered over in blight soil, and for whatever reasons, whether it's the genetics or some symbiotic thing, those plants that made it and produced these wonderful tomatoes that he's selling, you know, that would be a variety I would save. I would squeeze that into a container. So this is what nature does. Nature puts a slosh on the ground and it ferments. And so here's some that's been fermenting a few days. And actually, when you go the next step, usually this is completely covered over with this mold. It has fermented, and what happens is this gelatinous material gets slewed away in a digestive process, and it's believed that that does a form of cleansing. So here you have a seed that's been fermented a few days. This is the next step, and it's recommended after a day or two you put it outside because it gets to stinking. And you kind of dilute it a little, and the seeds hang out at the bottom. See, if you have any floaters, bad seeds. They're not, they're just not fully developed, or And what you do is you gently decant off, and all that stuff comes off. You get some of the goopy material too.
You leave the container open while it's fermenting.
I do. I'll put a cloth over sometimes because fruit flies just love this stuff.
Yeah.
Fruit flies really like me, or they like what I do. I get in my worm bin. Some people don't have problems. So, see, I was a little fast. You gotta let it settle. Decant off, and you get a little bit more each time. And you can see, you know, you're getting purer and purer seed.
This is before or after the fermentation?
This is after the fermentation.
After, yeah, that's right.
Normally it ferments a little longer, or it's really a whole crust on top.
How long did
But-
you say you should ferment?
Well, you know, generally it's 2 to 3 days, and this was 4 days, and I guess because it's just a little cooler. You don't want it to go so long because the seeds will begin to sprout, and then of course when you dry them, they're going to die and they won't come back. So what you do is you just keep decanting until you have a clear, you get all the goop off. And then you can put them on a surface to dry. And my favorite to do, because I'm often just doing one at a time, but if you're doing a large scale seed saving thing, you might get some of these screens, or some of these screens that you put over a fry pan. Those are nice screens too. And let it drain. See, I'll just use my sieve, and I'll take a rag, and that sucks off a little bit of that. You want your seeds to dry fairly fast, so it's great if you have them where some air is flowing through. Like here, you could have a breeze going through. You could have in front of a fan, or where there's airflow right by your air conditioner. Yes.
Could you use do you need food dehydrator with the fan and everything? Is that risky?
It's risky. I've had a dehydrator going for these tomatoes, and I have perched my thing nearby, but for drying tomatoes you need 135 degrees, and you don't want this to be 135. Now you can tone it down if you are confident, if you check that temperature and it's not over 90 degrees. 90. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I'm using my head here. What starts killing cells? You know, organisms are pretty uniform. If our temperature gets above 100 degrees, we're in trouble. You start breaking down enzymes, proteins. So just be mindful that keep the temperature low. If you want to do that, so I perched it near, figuring 135 degrees. All I wanted was some airflow because I had it inside, and I wanted to get some air flowing across. The main thing is not too much heat and quickly. So a little towel under here will just wick most of that moisture off, and then you can let her dry. So that's how easy it is to save tomato seeds. Now I'm going to remark one more thing. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 varieties of tomatoes out here, and I learned just this year. I'd heard tomatoes are self-pollinating, but some of them are risky, that they'll cross-pollinate, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And then I read about the anatomy of the flower, the tomato flower, and some of the flowers, the pistil is in. They're all have a little sheath around the pistil, and some of them the pistil is inside that, and some of them it protrudes. And if the pistil protrudes, it's at risk for cross-pollinating with any little insect. And so what you have to do is look at the flower. You get a little magnifying glass and look at the flower. And what I learned, I seed saved all these just this way, but only the Jean